So what was your initial reaction when you first read the script to your character?
It was really fun. As soon as I read and I realized that there was a big arc for her, I was very excited. The best thing for me was the end. But I remember reading, I was at my boyfriend's house, and I remember reading that, and I was like, wait, I can't stop reading this, I have to keep going. And I read it all in like one run. And it was just so much fun, and I was just so excited for my character. At the end, everything that happened was like, yes. So it was really fun.
One of the things I really liked about your character is obviously you're dealing with possessions and like demons. It's a scary, but it's also grounded in reality because the domestic abuse storyline.
Yes.
How did you feel being able to like explore both, obviously the possession and the supernatural part, but actually keep it real?
It's important to separate because it's two things completely different. Like the domestic abuse that my character goes through, it's very real, and you have to keep grounded into that. And then the possession that is completely supernatural, and it doesn't really happen in real life. I hope so. So to keep that, it's very important to stay very grounded, and it's a process to go through, but still make it happen. And everyone in the cast and crew actually helps a lot.
I did the scene obviously when you actually face your abuser. I thought it was one of the most powerful scenes of the film.
Yes.
Yeah, how did you work on that scene? Because that was very, very traumatizing and powerful.
Yeah, so that scene happens because the witch kind of gets in my character's head. So I spoke to my co-star about the scene because it was a very important scene. And we just kind of went through of like, okay, let's have a talk here. What are characters going through? Like, what do they go through? Like, how do they get to this point right here? Let's like brainstorm a little bit. So we just talked about, and then we kind of were like, okay, do we need like a background story? Let's do that. Do we need anything personal? Let's do that. So we just kind of worked through it together, and then once we finally got to it, we made it happen.
And then how fun was it to recover from that and have a badass fight scene?
Oh, that was the best part. Are you kidding me? After crawling on the floor so many times and then going and killing everyone? That was the best part. That was the best.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. I was curious, what inspired you to want to tell a story about exorcism, but based more in the real world?
Okay, so yeah, my dad was a pastor, so I've seen actual exorcisms when I was younger.
Wow, it's
Yeah, so he was a Pentecostal pastor, so we've seen things like that. Not like on this movie, like on that level, but that's kind of like, just from seeing things when I was younger, that was that kind of like stuck in my mind like that. That's why it's like I have a lot of ideas, but that was one that stuck at that point in my life where I just was like, let me write this.
It's one of the things I really loved about your film because it felt like usually we go to like Italy, we go to this like extravagant Vatican. I like the fact that it was in real locations with real people.
Right.
Do you think maybe your personal experience with it made it more grounded for you to be able to explore this?
It did. Like, actually, my dad had his church across the street from where we lived when we were like growing up. So it was like I had that same. So that's why we built the little temple in the back. It's just kind of something I already saw similar. Not exactly though. Like obviously I dramatized it. Things like that. Yeah.
Your opening scene in a dive bar, which is one of my favorite scenes.
Right.
What made you decide to land as you want to introduce the character in the first exorcism in kind of like definitely a real location?
Right. Well, because I thought about it. I've never seen an exorcism take place in like a bar. So I was trying to be the first guy to do that. It might be out there. I just haven't seen it yet personally.
No, I have not. That's why I was really fascinated, because I love exorcism movies. All right, Christopher Orrico and Sean Gasly and Jessica Chaves are wonderful. And they're really the three key actors. What did you see in them that made you know that they were perfect to play the team that actually has to face off?
Okay, so Chris, he's someone I knew where I live. And so me and him actually have hanged out in different places and, went out and stuff like that. So he's like in a rock band and things like that. So I told him, you have a really good, unique feel to you, like authentic. And people that are in bands and things like that, they know that themselves. So he was like, let's do it. And he didn't believe me, but it was like, it took about 2 years for it to finally happen. And then he was like, really? I'm like, no, it's happening. You know how it is in movies, you got to get everything going, the vegetables and all that kind of stuff. And so when it finally happened, he was just like, look, all right, took his time off of work, we worked and everything like that, and we just did it. So it was more like I just felt something with him. Even though like my producers were sending me a lot of other actors, at, like interviews and stuff like that. And even though like they were sending me auditions, I'd still chose them because kind of had a good feeling about him. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Jessica's performance because obviously she's tormented by the witch, but the backstory, the domestic violence had really resonated as a real true thing, and I thought that scene was very powerful when she had to face her personal demon. How did you feel about that scene and working with Jessica to capture a very real emotional moment?
Yeah, Jessica did really good, and she worked through a lot of like the scenes that we were doing. I didn't realize because she was kind of in the scene where she was on the ground and she kept doing the scene over and over again. I didn't realize till like the next day her legs and everything were bruised. She's like one of those kind of actors that just goes through it no matter what, and just to get the scene done. So, but before that, I saw her audition, and so out of all them, that's the one I resonated with the most because she seemed to just have the character that I was feeling would play that part.
I did like her relationship with Fred. I thought it was a fun relationship. How did you kind of work with them to kind of build their kind of camaraderie?
Right. Yeah, so it was almost like she was like, "Are we romantic, or do we get it?" And that was something I thought maybe I do, but at the end I thought about it and I go, no, they don't always have to be like that. They just are coexisting together and just trying to figure each other out and everything, and we help each other.
Yeah.
So we kept it like that, and so it became like their relationships are kind of like just a friendship all the way through.
Obviously, casting is key, and your three leads, Christopher Arco, Jessica Chaves, and Sean Gessler, were wonderful. How did you go about finding such wonderful actors?
Well, we just meticulously looked at them and said, they'll work. No, not really. But these guys over here, they had more a hand in that. I just put my stamp of approval because they did a fantastic job in fixing them and getting them ready for their parts. So I had a little bit knowing some of them, but yeah.
Now, I assume you didn't have the Marvel level budget for the film. What were the challenges of trying to put all these different locations and your shooting schedule on more of a lower budget?
Oh, yes. That was challenging because that meant we're going to have to be crafty and engineer most of these things ourselves, like building the sets and so forth. So I built the temple and a bunch of other key props. So it was a challenge, but I was up for it because that's what I do, my normal profession. So this one was unique, and I was up for the challenge because it was a chance to just bring my creativity all the way to the top, of the witch's tit. Boom.
And it must have been good because obviously with low budget, the team must have been much closer because you all had to work together and kind of all pull together, in a shared vision.
Yes, we did. We had to pull together because collectively we needed to be in unison. We needed to just make this thing, go, and it was going to take all our collective efforts. And if one of us was missing, it was just going to dismiss. So, yes.
We have a lot of students that actually watch our show. I'm just curious. So what do you look for in a crew member? If like a lot of young students want to break in the industry, what trait do you really want when you think about, I want to hire this person?
Oh, we need them to never stop asking, moving, and helping. So they need to just be all hands on, and we need them to be ready for the next move. Just whatever they can do. Sometimes what we ask of you won't be something that they're qualified for, but when they try, we know that we got something special.
So we're going to go back to the beginning when your script. So you read the script, you obviously love it. What were your anxieties and concerns about, I've got to make this movie as a producer?
Well, first of all, I've got to be honest with you. I love horror films, period. So being able to just, work with a director that has such a vision to create and build characters the way Art does has really helped me as a producer and helping me, build his scripts in the best possible way. I think if you go back, we casted. I don't even remember. I think it was almost 4 or 5 months ahead of time because we did a lot of rehearsals. We did a lot of chemistry reads. So we wanted to just make sure that these characters meshed correctly for Art on the screen.
And it must be, when you have a tighter budget and a shorter production schedule, it must be a great asset knowing that your actors are in sync and on board.
So what we did to kind of keep them in sync again was the chemistry reads. So we kind of set up chemistry reads. We kind of had them work with independently with the other characters so that we can get a feel and a better feel of the character. And actually, so I could send that over to Art and we can get that complete visual, because your characters and your casting are what create the story, and the story creates the film.
Yeah. All right, so I heard there was an exhaustive process of trying to cast Roseanne the Witch. How did you land on the wonderful actor to play Roseanne the Witch?
Well, I have to be honest, that's actually me. I actually come from a background of scaring people from haunted houses. I actually scored 2 Actor of the Year awards in haunted houses, and I brought that to the attention of Arthur, and he kind of like, I think you play great. So he said, it's going to be tough. Is this something you could do? Executive producing and putting your heart and soul into Roseanne and the tape man and the 4 hours of makeup and everything all mixed in. But I was able to handle it, and I think the movie turned out great, and the fans are loving it.
Yeah, I gotta say, how fun was the sequence when you got to torture your brother?
So honestly, that was one of my favorite scenes. I remember he told me, he was like, just kind of like, you're just gonna basically fling it on him, and I'm like, okay. So it's just like, okay, I felt so bad, and you're like visualizing, is that my brother? I just like threw all that water on top of. And I was like, and it's supposed to be like this boiling hot, and it was crazy. It was a great scene, and then you have to also I think the other scene that was really fun to shoot with Art was being dragged. And I literally got dragged.
This film obviously was a major undertaking. What was the process finding the crew, the vast crew that you needed that could handle multiple jobs, but on more of a smaller budget set?
Well, I think the biggest thing was just trying to figure out the budget. I remember me, Art, Vic, were all in like a Denny's, and we just kind of we had to break down the whole script. We had to figure out which character is going to do what. There was so much involved in it, and with the limited budget that we had to try to find the right crew members that would be able to work in directly with us and work directly with Art to create what we created on the screen. And I would say that the crews, we were mainly looking for people that had experience on kind of bigger feature films, or had experience working with bigger, TV productions or that's what I was looking for. And then I would send those over to Art, and we would kind of go through that and try to figure out, hey, is this person going to work? Is this person going to work? I think at the end we ended up with a still photographer, we had a steady cam operator, we had a first assistant camera, we had a great cinematographer. I believe hopefully he'll be here soon, Ian. He's one of them I know on the list, so I'd love for him to talk to you. And then we had a steady cam. That steady cam was Michael. He's supposed to be here too, so he'd be another great one to talk to. Now, on the sense of the crew, I mean, without, I have to physically think, not just from the crew, but to our cast and to everybody involved in this movie, because we couldn't have made the movie without all these people coming together, and it was really great. I mean, we, from our special effects people to our makeup people, for what we had to work with, I think we did an amazing job.
I actually was very impressed with Ian, the cinematography of the film, because you have multiple timelines, flashbacks. He had a great look of red, I noticed, the possession.
Yeah.
What was the process like? He really got very creative.
One thing about Art is he's got a great visual eye. If he sees something he likes, he'll know it right away. That's the way his visual eye is. And it's just like when we had to take the takes, it would be like he would know exactly what take he was going to use almost before we get it into the editing room. That's how well his eye is when it comes to when he's looking at these when we're shooting it even. Now, there were a couple things that we kind of, you can see when the movie's out, that you can see that we put together in a stronger fashion, like the end scene with the witch holding like the hand out and, frying. I mean, some of that stuff was special effects. We added the special effect with the broomstick going through Hunter, and that's catching people really, and that's scaring some people. And then we also have like a couple of pop scares in between there that you'll see. And the way Art and Mia spoke, and the way we wanted this to roll is we wanted everybody to get excited about the witch without seeing the witch. So sometimes what you don't see is scarier than what you can see. So we were thinking, oh, this guy, we're going to do this kind of like in the Alfred Hitchcock style. So at the end, you finally get a chance to see this witch in all her form and how strong she is and how she just basically destroys everybody, including Father Bernard, which is played by Eric Hartson.
I really did like your end shot with the coming out of the fire. When
Yeah.
coming out of the fire, I thought it was
Isn't
one of
that
my
really
favorite
cool?
shots.
Yeah, I thought that was one of my favorite shots. Our special effects guy, I think it was John McKellen, really put that together. I thought it was just really good. It really looked really good. And when I saw it, I was like, that is what I think we were missing in that scene. Like the minute I saw that. So, I mean, going back with how far I am with horror, I loved horror movies all the way back to when Jaws first came out. And to that day, I've always wanted to visualize and figure out, how can, I get involved in making these scary films. And that's when I met Art, and from there, we developed a great relationship on making these great films. And he wants to constantly make great horror films, and that's what I want to do. Coming from the horror background and the actor of the year and haunted houses that I've done in my past. But as an actor, I've been working for over probably 20, maybe 20 years, somewhere around there as an actor. So yeah, I've worked with a lot of actors over the years, but scripts, good ones, are really hard to come by. Yeah.
Okay, so you read the script of the Unholy Song, and what was your biggest concern? Like, I've got to pull this off. What was the aspect that you were most concerned? Like, I got to find a way to pull this off.
I think it was trying to bring the tape man kind of to life. The description was very well done, so I wanted to make sure it was gonna kind of leap off the page of the script and conveyed that on the screen, the fear that the priest would be feeling.
She was terrifying. What was the process of getting Quintgabriel to play in the makeup chair, working to kind of develop the look?
So there was two big makeup looks. That was the tape monster, and then also Roseanne the witch. I went with a more classic approach of latex and tissue paper, so that it gave the effect of like paper mache. Because there was a doll earlier in the film that the witch uses, so we wanted to kind of transfer that doll-like appearance to the witch at the end. So it's a decayed kind of paper mache texture.
And what about Tape Man? Because I heard that was a long time in the chair.
Yes, that was a long time. That was a prosthetic that I used Boneyard Effects for. It was actually a burnt zombie prosthetic that we turned into a demon prosthetic. So we just gave it more of a shadow with grays and whites for the highlights and shadows.
All right, and so when you first read the script of The Unholy Song, what was your reaction and your fears about having pulled this film off?
My reaction was excitement because I love shooting dark things. I love shooting terrifying things. And so I saw a lot of opportunity in the script to make something that is just like subtle and creepy and kind of makes the audience squirm and not know why. My fears pulling it off there were some effect sequences that I knew were going to be somewhat difficult to pull off, and so my eyes always kind of immediately go to those as areas that are going to take some thought and some planning, and so those were my immediate reactions.
I really enjoyed the different timelines. You had flashbacks, and you stylized each one slightly different. You had to look different. What was the process of trying to establish the different timelines and the situation, how you wanted the film to look?
Well, Art and I kind of talked about like the different phases of the movie, and we really basically went on how present the witch was to determine a look. And so we would change like the lighting and the color temperature to reflect the presence of the witch. And the more present she is, the kind of the darker and colder the situation becomes. And then when she's really there, we start to see like a red underlight in the scene. So it was really just figuring out how close the witch was to the characters. and that reflected in how we shot the different sequences, including the flashbacks.
One of my favorite sequences at the end when Jessica Chaves, our wonderful star, gets to go John Wick badass.
Yeah.
How was the process of shooting that sequence?
Man, that was a crazy night. You know, it was a big scene, and we had a very small crew by necessity, and not a ton of time to shoot a scene with that many moving pieces. And so what we ended up doing was just like blocking the scene like crazy, so we could look at it and figure out what was really necessary to convey the action. And then we kind of set up like a lighting scenario that worked in a lot of ways to let the actors play it out and not like obfuscate it by doing too many changeovers. We wanted something that would be like a big setup that we could live in and really let the actors flex what they do and see the excitement of the action.
I did love your ending money scene with the fireplace and finally really showing the witch in person. What was the process of shooting that sequence?
Well, you know, there was a lot of special effects fire that we were working on, and it was kind of doing some sneaky lock-off shots so that we could do fire, and then the witch's outfit was very flammable, and so we were kind of playing with that, and like had to be able to superimpose things on top of each other without doing a full green screen. So we had to be very careful about how we took the shots and then make them repeatable. So it was a fairly difficult sequence to shoot.
So what was your initial reaction when you first read the script and to your character?
Honestly, I loved it. I knew right away getting into it that whoever wrote it was a talented screenwriter. And I noticed hints of inspirations from the classic horror films of the 70s, so which immediately made me interested. So I know that when I got kind of a sense of the character for Jasper, for me it just again harkened back to the kind of trope where there's always a troublemaking guy that gets everyone else into trouble. So that was appealing for me as well. I didn't for one moment hesitate when Arthur was like, "Hey, you got the part." I was never like, "I don't think I'm not gonna do this" or whatever. It was fun for me.
And how fun was shooting the scene when you let out the witch?
That was fun. That was awesome because, again, from all of those classic films of the past, I was able to flesh out how this character was going to, in his maniacal way, get everyone else into trouble. Which in my own life I love doing anyways.